What is up? I'm Harbor with Extra Credit Design Club, and this is part 7 of the Designing Your First Typeface series. This being part 7, we've gone a long way up until now. We're familiar with the software of Glyphs Mini, and we've drawn all of our glyphs for our geometric sans serif typeface. In this video, we are going to specifically cover spacing. Now, when I talk about spacing, you might use two terms interchangeably, spacing and kerning, but these two things are different. Spacing refers to the overall spacing of the typeface in its entirety. Is there a lot of space in between each letter? Is there a little space in between each letter? Generally, that is spacing. Kerning, on the other hand, is the spacing between two individual specific letters that you might need to add manually. So good practice when you're spacing a typeface is first, get your spacing right. If your overall spacing is working, then you're going to have to do less kerning or less manipulating individual problem pairs of letters. Alright, so with that definition and expectation set, first spacing, then kerning, let's jump into the Glyphs Mini software and get going. Just as a quick note, before I talk about spacing, I did go back and refine a couple of the characters. So the B, E, F, the L, the P, R, and the U, and the Z in the capitals, for example, I made all more narrow. That's because I really liked how my S was looking, but it was the only narrow character. So rather than making my S wide, I made everything else a little more narrow just to give this typeface a little something something. It's not just all one width, I've done that before. We've seen it before. So this one is a little bit different. I also refined the spine of the S. Usually that's going to take a lot of massaging, so I did that there. The M on these top apexes here, I just made them a little more refined, a little more narrow. And then with the K, I actually made it slightly wider. The lowercase I was pretty much happy with. I just made the Z slightly more narrow. The 2 I made more narrow. The 4 I changed up the form a bit to make it fit in better with this geometric sans serif vibe. And the 7 I also made more narrow. So after you are happy with all of the double checking and the refining your shapes, making sure they all work together, type out a couple words, type out a couple sentences, make sure they look good, then you can move on to spacing. And that is simply because you don't want to get perfect spacing and then later change the shape of your letters and have to start over on your spacing. It can be a mess, so make sure you are happy with your forms, as happy as you can be before you start spacing. And just a quick note to highlight each individual letters. If you want to call attention to them, you can simply select them and choose a color down here to highlight them with. However, now that I've shown you what I changed, I'm just going to highlight everything, hit the X, and now we are normal. None of our characters are highlighted in any specific color. So, like most things, I am going to start spacing with the capital H. And what I'm going to do here is just type a string of capital H's. Zoom out a hair and just kind of see, what's the vibe. So when it comes to spacing, you have a couple different options based on what your typeface is going to do. If your typeface is going to be used for text, for long, books, articles, you're going to want a little bit looser spacing. That's because it is going to be in small sizes and you don't want the letters to blend into each other and create a jumbled mess. You want a little bit of breathing room for your little eyeballs. If it's a display typeface, however, the spacing is going to be slightly tighter, less space in between each character because it's big, it's legible, you know what you're looking at, and you generally want to save space with titles. So with that here, This, I am going to say, is a display typeface. I'm not really planning on using it for setting long text, so I'm going to go a little bit tighter with my spacing. That being said, I think that 100 is too tight. I'm going to test out 120 and see how that looks. Okay, it's a little bit looser. It's good for display. If I was going for text, I'd make it slightly more loose, but we'll start with 120. Now, when we have our H at 120, the straight sides, we can say, oh, there are multiple glyphs with straight sides. So if I know my H is 120, I can know that other letters also will have a side bearing of 120. So to do that here with the H, knowing it has straight sides and side bearings of 120, I'm going to go through my letters, and first I'm going to look at the left side of the letters and see which letters, like the H, just have that straight left side. So that would be the B, the D, E, F. We already did the H, so the I, K, L, M, N, P, R, and that is it. Besides the lowercase, we have R there. I'm going to count the I with it. It's close enough. And in the numbers, none of them. Okay. And I am happy with that. Instead of 100 here, how they generally all are, I am going to just type in H. So now whenever I change the H, all of these letters will automatically update. It's super valuable for if, later on I decide I don't like my spacing, I can just change the H and then all the rest of the letters will automatically update. So next, I want to look at the right side of my letters and see if any of them match the H. I have my I have M, N, I have that and that, and I am also going to type H down here for the side bearings. Awesome. Now, the next thing I want to look at after I'm happy with my H's is my O's. So I'm going to type in a couple H's and a couple O's right here. So you can see that the space in between this H and the O looks a bit wider than the space in between my two individual H's. But in fact, if you go to the side bearings, the space on my O is more narrow. So just because of the shape of this O being round, I'm going to need to compensate and make the side bearing more narrow. Now, when it comes to spacing, because the edges of letters look different and it's hard to tell, one thing that always helps me is imagining I'm pouring sand in between these letters. And I want there to be the same amount of sand in between two H's as there is between the H and the O. So I am going to adjust this, and I'm adjusting this one on the left, but I'll look at the O on the right to see when the spacing is matching this H, imagining if I'm pouring water or sand into this space, will it be the same volume as this here? So dropping it down, I think something like that. So I'll do 30 and I'll do 30 here. Now if I'm looking back, analyzing it, okay, it looks pretty good. I might even do 35. Generally when I'm doing spacing, I do it by 5s or 10s. I don't get, 32 pixels, 33. If you want to, awesome, power to you, but I like to keep it simple and go by increments of 5. And now that to me looks like a pretty good space. So similar to how we did with the H, I'm going to go back to my full type panel here, and I'm going to look at the left side of the letters, and any of them that have the same shape as the capital O, I am going to designate with capital O right there. and then going through looking at the right side and Q. All right, and I am going to designate capital O. Awesome. Now the last one I'm going to do with this method, HH, is the A. So for the A, my default is always starting off at 10, right? I want as much space as possible in between here. And this is one of those circumstances where even though my side bearing for the A is at 10, maybe I could do it at 5, you know? That's as low as I ever want to go. I never want to have 0 as a side bearing because I don't want things to crash and mash up into each other. If I type 2 A's, for example, I want there to be a little bit of space just right here. So with 5 here, I can see that this is still a bit wide, but it comes to a point where I say it can't be helped. It's a really wide A, and I don't want to go 0, and I don't want to go negative in my side bearings. So for this situation, I'm just going to say, okay, I am happy enough with that A. When people are reading, when they see letters like A, like V, naturally there is just going to be more space in between those letters, especially when you're doing a display type and you want things to be close together. If you're doing a type for text, the space between the H and the H is going to be wider. So when I set the space of the A to 0, I'm going to be, you know, a little more evenly spaced, but that's getting into the weeds. Anywho, I have my A. I like it. It's minimal space. So I am going to, once again, go to my typeface here, and I'm going to consider every letter that I want minimal space. On the left side, I know the J. I want minimal space because it just is boop, just a little bit going on. The T, I want minimal space. Oh, the T, the V, W, X, and Y. All of them are going to be A on this left side. And then on the right side, where do I want minimal space? Let's see, the K, the P possibly, but possibly not. F possibly, possibly not. I'll leave those. The T, V, W, X, and Y. Also, I'll type A here. Minimal space for those. And now we've done most of our spacing for most of our capitals. There are going to be a few exceptions, things we haven't defined. For example, the B has a unique shape here on the right. E, F, we have our J, which is a unique shape here. We did our K's spacing. Did we do our L? Oh, I missed the L. I want minimal spacing on the right here, so B, E, F, I have my J, I have my P, my R, my S, my U, and my Z. So I'm going to open all of those by holding Command down arrow, and I am going to type in a line of H's as a reference, and then under these I am going to start with the B and just do this same process. Get my spacing right. So right here I'm looking at 100. I think it's a little wide, so on my B I'm going to drop that down maybe 20 points. Maybe 75. Yeah, I like how 75 looks. And now for the E. Alright, it's looking, honestly, pretty good as is. I'm going to keep that at 100. So for the F, right here, I am going to 100, minimize that space. For the F, we have a similar problem to the A in that if I'm pretending like I'm really filling this with water, it's going to fill in this space under the F. It's going to fill in this space between the arms. You know, it's not a perfect analogy, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball where I want to be. I'll go with 80. Awesome. Now we'll hit our J. Okay, I like my spacing here for A on the left. On the right side, I'm looking at this compared to this, and I'm pretty happy with 100 there, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go to my P. Way too much space at 100. I'm going to drop that down. Okay, and yeah, 40, 40, 50, maybe split the difference, 45. Okay, I like that. 45 we'll go with. And we will go with our R next. I'm talking about 100's too much. Bringing that in, looking back, squinting. Maybe it's 90. Maybe it's 80. Yeah, I think it's 80. Awesome. We'll move on to our S. And we are working with 100, 100, too wide. I'm going to try 80, 80. How's that looking? Okay, one thing that I can also do, if I can't quite tell, I'm not happy about how I'm able to tell here, I can bring up with this little I a string of characters down here, and I can see them at a smaller size. And that to me, as far as S, I might drop it down just 5. 75 might work for me. Okay, that looks good. Awesome. Finally, moving on to the U and the U. Now, with the U, it is the same shape as this J, more or less. So I think, what did I do for the J? 100 for the U. 100 seems to be working. So I'm just going to change this J to be U. Use a little bit more of an iconic shape. It's symmetrical, so I'm going to base the J off the U instead of the U off the J. And then finally, we have the Z. Z can be a tricky character, but let's see what we can do with it. 100, too loose. I'm going to look down here for the Z. Let's try 60 on either side. I think 60 is still a little too loose, maybe 50. 50, still loose. 40. 40. Dare I try 30? Okay, I think 30 is appropriate. Maybe a little too tight. Let's go back to 4. Let's split the difference, 35. We'll see how that looks. Okay, 35, that to me is working. So we have all of the capital letters spaced out, even, awesome. Now if I type any word, cool. Oh, gotta be capitals. Cool. I can see, okay, I like how things are relating to each other. I can type in a line of H's, a line of O's, and I can see that, yeah, the space in between the O's looks similar to the space in between the H's. If I'm looking down here, okay, the rhythm looks right. There it is. So with these same principles, we are going to apply them to the lowercase letters. I might move a little bit quicker now that, we kind of got a gauge for how this process is working. So with the lowercase, the character I'm going to start with is the N. So I am going to type a line of N's. And I think I am going to say for the side of the N, for the left side, I am just going to keep it with the H. So, oh, did I have 100 or did I have 120 is what I wanted? Ah, much better, okay. So, for my N, I'm going to keep the left side even to my H, and I am going to keep the right side slightly more narrow, so maybe 100. I'll type in HHH and HH. And gauge. Does this and this spacing look even? I'll open up my panel down here. And to me, I think 105 might be better. Maybe 110. Okay, 110 looks good to me. So, like we did earlier, I am going to get the characters that look like my N on the right side, on the left side. So that would be, I'm going to use the B also. That's a straight character. The H, I, L, M, and boom. I'm going to call all of those N. And then I'm going to look on the right side of my characters. I have the H, I have the N, I have the, okay, and I'm going to call those N. Now, one thing to note and pay attention to, when you are adjusting spacing and you have components in your typeface, you might run into problems. Let me show you what I mean. So we have here our H, and our H is using a component from our N. Now it looks good in our N, but when we go to our H, we can see that some wonkiness, the component was moved. So if you are working with components, always make sure that you have things nice, even, things are looking good after you are done with your spacing. And how am I looking here? I'm looking good. Very nice. Okay, one thing to note at this point, a couple things is we have here our U. So our U looks like our N, but flipped around. If I type in an N and a U, awesome. I can't do on my side bearings here N and N because, I mean, it will give me 120 on the left and 100 on the right. So one thing I can do is if my glyph here is a perfect component, it will automatically adjust the side bearings. However, let's say it wasn't a component, let's say I decomposed it, and I had to define the side bearings myself. There are certain equations, codes, syntaxes that you can use in the side bearings to indicate I want this left side of the U to equal the right side of the N. So what we can do there is we can hit equal. That indicates for this side bearings, I want it to equal this certain equation. And then to flip the sides, I hit the bar, and then I hit the lowercase n. So now the software knows that this side bearing should equal the opposite side of the n. And I'll do the same here. Equals bar n. So now my U is going to have the same side bearings as my N, but reversed. Awesome. So going back, making sure I got everything. Okay. My P could be called an N as well. Did I get my R? Nope. I'm getting lazy. I'm getting too fast. Ooh. That side bearing could be an N as well. And then we have also other characters that we know we can flip. For example, the A for the right side bearings, we can do equals bar N right here. For the D as well, we can do equals bar N. We could also just as easily put H right there, you know, doesn't matter, what have you. Now, because the P and the Q and the D are all perfect components, their side bearings will be calculated automatically from the B. So we don't need to worry about those. Going through, side bearing of H on my K here. You know, instead of N, I'll just do H for these tall ones. And that is that. So now that we have the N established, the next thing we are going to establish is the rounded characters based off the lowercase o. Now the lowercase o spacing might be different than the capital, so pay attention to that. And in order to test it, I am going to NN, ONN, ONN, get my line here. And I'm going to open up my little text down here. And I can see that my O spacing is far too wide. Let's bring that into 40, 30, see how 30 looks. 30, that might be looking a bit tight. I might do 35, and I might do 35 as well. Now, okay, am I consistent with this space? Is this space consistent? Yeah, I would say this space is maybe, yeah, that's consistent as well. Okay. And just for kicks, what did I do for my capital O? Oh, just so happened, also 35. Now, again, the lowercase o isn't always exactly the same as the capital, so you're going to need to do them individually. In this case, it just so happened that they look good, both being 35. Now, like always, I'm going to go looking at the left side of my characters and seeing which ones relate to the O. Okay, and I can change all of those to a lowercase o, and then again on the right side. Right here, and lowercase o. Awesome. And then finally, I have my characters with minimal spacing, which are V, W, X, and Y. And I am going to put those each for 5. I'm going to see how they look just in case. V, W, X, Y, N, N, V, N, N, V, N. All right. So that to me is looking pretty good. You can see I have more space here on this side than I do here. That is something that we will need to address with kerning. Unfortunately, with this particular typeface, it's something that cannot be helped. So it's a niche case in which you might need to kern whole sets, but again, getting into the weeds, we'll tackle kerning when we get to it. All right. So now that we have all of the ones we can kind of generalize, let's get into the specific letters. So I have here, oh, my K, I want minimal spacing as well. So I will put right here for all these lowercase ones, I will define them with the V instead of 5. Lowercase v. Okay. K, I want to be also V, minimal spacing. Awesome. I could define them as A just as easily, but for the sake of, in case I want to make a change that applies to the lowercase and not the capitals, I'm using a lowercase letter here for the indication of the spacing. All right, so our individual characters here, the unique looking ones. Let's go R, S, T, and Z. Awesome. And let's do as we did before, space those against an N. Okay. And an N, F, and N, F, and N. Okay, what are we working with here? At first, my F, I need to drop that down. Okay, I'm happy with 60. Now we'll see on this side, I'll probably go for a more, okay, 40. And it looks a little bit, maybe I'll go, okay. I'm gonna open up this down here always. The lowercase are a bit more tricky. Gotta get real finicky. 60 I think is a little too wide now that I'm seeing it. We'll try 50. And whoop. Nice space here. We'll go 30. All right, awesome. For the G, I have O here, and down this side I have, that's, okay, yeah. I'll make that side of the right side G 110. For the R, I'm probably going to want minimal spacing, but I'm not sure. 100. 50. Okay. I think 50 is looking good for the spacing of the R. Possibly even 60. Again, with the metaphor filling this up with water, it kind of falls apart with the lowercase r. But as I've mentioned before, the lowercase r is a charlatan. Not easy to deal with. Okay, for my S, I'm going to maybe go 80 and 80, 90, 80. I'll keep it there. As I'm spacing, I'm noticing that this side of the N is definitely causing me problems. So instead of 110, I think I might do 100. Get it even more narrow. All right, that to me, now that my S is 80, 90, looks a little bit more evenly spaced. 90 and 90, 80 and 80. Awesome. Okay. For my T, it's going to be similar to the F, so something like 40 works there. And on this side, something like, oh, let me type in my second T here. Something like that is looking good. 70, maybe 60. I'll go 65, split the difference. And then the Z. And I am going to, we'll start off with 50, see how that looks. 50. 40, is that 40 too narrow? 40's looking a bit narrow, maybe 45. Okay, 45 to me seems good. So there we have it. That is our spacing. Just double checking, making sure I didn't miss any characters. Oh, I don't think I did the J. I definitely did not do the J. So the J, that's going to be minimal spacing there. And I'm going to say probably for here equals bar n. All right. Now for the J, I think I might even go negative spacing. Now, normally I say never do negative spacing. However, because the J is the has this descender off to the left here, I know that it won't run into any other characters besides possibly my Q lowercase. So I might make that negative, maybe negative 20. And see how that works, see if that helps. And I might even test it against my Q. Negative 40 possibly. Maybe even 50. Yeah, okay. I don't want to get too wild. Okay. Really, a Q and a J never appear in nature together. Maybe a Y, but they're so far apart already. So, okay. I'm happy with -50 for my J. Going through, making sure I got everything, WXYZ. Awesome. So that is the basic workflow that we're going to do with spacing. For the numbers, I am going to space them against the capital H. So my line of H's, HH 0, HH 0, HH. And I know that my 0 is just going to be the same as my capital O. My 1, let's test that next. 1, 1. I know that my spacing here on the right is going to be the same as my H, and on the left here, I'll do 80, just so they appear centered. Maybe 85. Yeah. And I'm just going through, let's see, my 2. Ooh, way too much space there. Going through here. 40 looks good to me. Okay. And then okay, 80 looks good. And basically I'm just going to go through on the rest of these characters and use my spacing space accordingly with the same techniques that I've used before for the numbers. The punctuation is a little bit unique, so I will go through the punctuation in this video. Punctuation is unique in that it generally comes, at the end of a sentence, or followed or led by a space, or it just kind of follows slightly different conventions than do letters and numbers. So for that, we're going to use slightly different spacing techniques. I could have my line of H's here and then hit my period and say, okay, I know 100, the period looks like it's out on its own. It's just like, hey, whoa. So I'm gonna bring it in just slightly. And here, okay, I think that is good. This being a display typeface, maybe I even want it even more narrow of spacing. Okay, so yeah, 60 on my period looks good. And then for the comma, I want the same spacing, so I'm going to type in period there and period there. Same with my ellipse. I know I can type period and period. Awesome. So you might be thinking, oh, why can't we just type in an actual period? Well, it doesn't work. You have to type in the name of the glyph. So period works there. Our colon is similar to an nothing, let's be honest. It's similar to other things we'll design later. But how will it be used? It will generally be used at the end of a sentence, so like the list, colon, okay. And now just looking at it, against a T, it looks good. Against an N, it looks good. So it just so happens that 100 looks good, and I'm just going to keep 100 on both sides of my colon. And then the semicolon, I know that that is going to be the same as the colon, so I'm going to colon and colon. All right. Again, with the components, you'll notice that because I changed the spacing of the period itself, it changed the spacing of the component that was used. So I'm just going to move that back into place here, making sure that I'm lined up evenly. Okay, that looks even, centered, okay. And for my exclamation, I think it's safe to say it looks similar enough to an H that I'm going to add H to the side bearings. My question mark you can see here, again, I have a little bit of a wonkiness with the alignment. So, align that. All right. The spacing, I think, needs to be a little tighter. Might take it down to 60. Down to 60. Okay. And I would advise this. It's okay to be slightly looser on your punctuation than on your letters. You don't necessarily want your question mark to look like it's part of the word. It's at the end of the sentence. So especially if you're doing a text typeface, it is okay to have your punctuation possibly slightly looser. That's not doctrine. That's my own opinion. Take it or leave it. Your choice. I will not be offended either way. For my upside down question, because it is much different than my right side up one in how it fits, it has the descender, I am going to space that individually. So I think I'm going to go to 40 and 40 on either side of my down question. Maybe 50. 40 is a little bit tight. So now we get into the period center, our bullet, and then we have our hyphen, our M dash, our N dash, all of those. And those are generally found in between letters without spacing or as bulleted points. So one thing you might consider is when you're doing, for example, a list, and I have my bullet here. Let's pretend like it's at the beginning of a list. Isolating my bullet. Let's see, I can type in number 1. Okay, so I don't want the spacing of my bullet to be too tight because I want to be able to look at it at the beginning of a sentence and have it like, okay, I don't need to do bullet space and then start the thing, or maybe I do want to do bullet space. It depends. So with the side bearings of your bullet, adjust them accordingly. I like to leave my bullets slightly looser than what you might think, because they're so little. I might think, oh, minimal space, make it the same as the period. But I generally like to give my bullets slightly more breathing room. For my center period, that's usually used to stylistically instead of a space. Shift Option 9, it appears on my keyboard. Harbor Duran. Okay, so we have here, I think, as I'm seeing this, that is definitely not correct spacing. 60, okay. 100 and 100. That is looking pretty good compared to, wow, cool, wow, cool. I think it needs possibly even a little more breathing room. Possibly not. I'm just gonna leave it as is for now. Awesome. Okay, and I can use the same principles with my hyphens. I want them to be in a place where there's a little breathing room, more possibly than the periods. It's kind of boring because I set them as 100 for default, and I think 100 looks good. It just so happens. So I'm going to keep these all at 100, as opposed to if they were the same as my period. That looks good too. Okay, yeah, I'm going to keep them all the same as my period. Okay, so I have all this done. I'm going to delete those. So this is what we're left with. I'm going to start with the asterisk. I'm going to do, what? Asterisk. And I'm going to drop that down maybe 20. Pretty minimal spacing. See how that looks? All right, that to me looks good. Just to make sure, I'll do it the same as what an A might be. Oh, I got crazy. 5. But that spacing looks good as well. I think I'm going to go minimal spacing. A and A. Awesome. Now we have characters that are all similar to our asterisk in their spacing, and those are the quotations. So if I like where my asterisk is, I'm going to want my quote, all of those to be the same. I'm going to go to all of my quotes here, single quote, double quote. Asterisk. Spelt it wrong. Okay. And now going back here, seeing how those might look. One thing you can do if you want to preview different glyphs in a row without copying and pasting them is you can hold Shift and Command, then up and down arrow between glyphs. So awesome. So I'm happy with all my quotations here. And with that, I'm going to delete them from my list of characters. Okay, asterisk, that's gone. And I am going to move on. Let's do all these groups of brackets. Now I'm going to pay attention to the open sides of the brackets. Now normally you might think, oh, this looks like maybe a capital T or it just barely has a point here. But if I do minimal spacing, let's see, let's go to 5. It just is looking a little too tight here. So again, that's with the punctuation being kind of a unique thing. You can space your punctuation slightly looser. Because remember, it's not part of the word. It's a framing mechanism, a device within the sentence. You don't want your punctuation to look like part of the word. So you can space it slightly looser. I am going to change the spacing here to match the capital O. And then on this side, matching the capital O. And I think I accidentally did. Yep. Oh, okay. Good there. Good there. Woo. I don't know why that shot up. Don't like that. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Things are all looking good. And I am going to match that with my brackets. I'm going to keep them at 100. Keep them at 100. The openings here, I want to keep at 100. I know that these look like an H. So I'm going to keep that there on this side. The right side bearing is H. And then I'm going to deal with this bracket right here. In the case of these curly brackets, they will always be preceded by a space, in which case I can just add minimal side bearings. So I'll just do, I'll just do A and A, and I'll be happy with that. Okay, so we have all of our brackets done. Our underscore, I think it's probably safe to keep it 100. Funky. Cool. Safe to keep it 100. These right here, the gilments or whatever they're called. Let's see. Another form of quote. So we'll see how they look. All right. Now I'm looking at 148. I think I'm just going to go 100 because it seemed to be working for the rest of our punctuation. So I'll start off like that. And for these, seems to work as well. So awesome. I know all of those I want to be 100. 100, 100. They're all set. Take those to the bank. And then all we have left is our slash and our hashtag. So, slash. And I think that that is a little loose. I'll bring it into 20. Bring it into 20 on that side. Okay, that to me looks good. And I'll just apply the same to my other slash. And then finally, our hashtag. It's always going to be at the beginning of a letter, so that, or the beginning of a word, so that I'm not even going to test it in the middle of everything, because what for? And I think it needs to be more tight. Again, not too tight. We don't want it to be part of the letter. So I'm going to loosen that up a bit. Or we don't want it to be part of the word, rather. Okay, so 50 looks good. Alright, so with that, we have our typeface all spaced out. I would advise to now at this point just let me check. Just check, type in a bunch of cool words. Harbor, Duran, Hannah, all the people I love in my life, Mom, Dad, Riker, Brooklyn, and all of their spouses. I could go on and on and on. I digress. Just type out words, type out sentences. The quick brown fox, the sphinx of black quartz, whatever, and just see if you're happy with your spacing. You will run into certain wonkinesses if you're doing all caps and you type in the word waves. It's going to look ugly. That's when kerning comes into place. So with that, I think we'll cut it off there. I don't want to keep you here for too long with too much to digest in one video, so I'll make a separate video especially for kerning.